Greetings and salutations, everyone, and welcome back to tonight's second half. Before we jump into tonight's second half, a couple links. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon and PayPal are in the description below, merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, the links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It doesn't cost you a cent to click that like button. It takes half a second. If you don't want to miss any of the exciting and informative uploads I put out daily, click the bell icon, and finally, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all of these things, they do help this channel to continue to grow and go. And folks, they matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's get on with tonight's second half, shall we? Earlier today, I shared with you an interview from Ohio. Ohio and Pennsylvania have always seemed to be a verbal hotspot for Dogman and Bigfoot. And when I say verbal hotspot, I mean when people are like, oh yeah, I live in Ohio and I've seen one of these. I live in Pennsylvania and I've seen one of these. But there are those people out there that have not disclosed seeing these creatures in other states. For some reason, I feel like every state has about the same amount of encounters. It's just people in Ohio and Pennsylvania, they are more comfortable sharing, or honestly, maybe they are seen more in those states. I'm not sure. I do know that while looking at my subscriber submitted encounters, that I have folders for each state, Ohio and Pennsylvania, to be honest, are some of the two biggest files that I have. I don't believe there are more Dogmen and Bigfoot in those two states. I just think, like I said, maybe they are just seen more. To me, it doesn't make sense that a small state as Ohio or Pennsylvania would have more Dogman or Bigfoot in, let's say, Colorado or Montana. I really think that they're seen more there. Just my own theory, my own opinion. But anyway, let's jump into this upload. At the very end, there's going to be some video clips of some very horrifying and strange creatures. Let's get into it. Today's first subscriber Dogman, Ohio encounter. I live in southern Ohio near the Ohio River. Myself and a few friends decided to go explore an abandoned hospital that backed up to a giant hill and large forest across the river in Maysville, Kentucky. It was a local spot for dumb teenagers to go and scare each other and play grab-ass with their girlfriends. So running into other people was not uncommon, but you could usually tell if other people were there because there'd be cars parked nearby. That being said, on this night, we were the only dumb teenagers there. The moment we got out of the car, though, everything felt wrong. We knew we weren't allowed to be there because the building was condemned, but this felt like we were in actual danger, which of course we always were because it was condemned. But it just felt different. Now, by this point, I had been to Hazelwood Hospital 20 times or so, and I was familiar with the layout. Once the three of us had gotten inside, we had been there for about 45 minutes when we split up to tag some different places and explore. I went to go take some pictures of the morgue in the basement to see if I could photograph any orbs or anything cool. I'd been in the morgue for about 10 minutes when I smelled the most foul smell I had ever smelled. It was rotten. I didn't know what it was, but it was rotten. I imagined it was a large dog or coyote, but all I could make out was about 40 pounds of rotting meat. I had just started to look at the meat chunk when I heard the slam of the steel door and what sounded like running through puddles of water, which meant whatever it was in the basement with me because the floor had 3 inches of standing water in it. So naturally, I figured it was my shifty friends playing a prank on me. That was when I decided to get them back and scare them before they could scare me. Now, the way the morgue is set up, you could actually climb on top of the coolers they use to store the bodies. So I hopped up there and laid in wait to scare my friends. And I had been there no more than a minute when I heard screaming. Now I've known my friends my entire life, which at this point had been 19 years. I've never heard screaming like this. The scream stopped, and I heard hard footsteps running above me, and what I can best describe as pounding. Now, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't freaked out a little, because that was not like my friends. It was usually hiding behind a corner and jumping out and saying, "Gotcha." This was different. This was dread, and I started to feel it. As I continued lying there, about 5 minutes had passed when I heard panting and footsteps in the water. They were getting closer. That was when I smelled a wet dog. But it wasn't just a wet dog I was smelling. I was smelling the same smell of rot as well. Then another steel door slammed, and I could tell it was the same door I passed before I got to the morgue door. The panting was even louder now, and honestly, it sounded more like labored breathing and sniffing. Now at this point I'm terrified, trying to slowly back away from the edge of the cooler I'm on, so I can slip behind the wall of the cooler. The cooler backs up to the drop-in boiler room, and I'm almost to the end of the cooler when I hear the morgue door slam open and break the tiles on the wall with the handle. I'm less than 35 feet from whatever is panting and smelling like death. And all I can think is, run, run, run. I could hear sniffing, and then I heard the deepest, most menacing growl I'd ever heard. The movies and shows don't do justice to just how deep and rough a growl of the size sounds. It was scaring me, sniffing me out. It was actually smelling where I had been. I dropped down behind the wall in the boiler room, and I thanked God the door that connected the morgue to it was blocked with some old gurneys and a locker on its side, which I thought would stop this thing from getting in. I was wrong, very wrong. I hadn't been in the boiler room 30 seconds before I heard the pounding and scratching on the steel door. It sounded just like Freddy Krueger trying to carve his way through the steel door. Then I heard the sound that still haunts me to this day. It howled, and I mean it bellowed a howl so loud I had to cover my ears. Now on the other side of the boiler room was the access to the generator and the dock doors trucks used to unload, and the hillside that led to the woods. When I reached the other side of the room, I could hear this thing slamming into the door and knocking the lockers away and the gurneys. I opened the door to the dock room, and when I looked back, I saw the arm of this creature sticking through the opening it had made, and it was just like a horror movie. It was gray and brown, massive fur, but it looked like a human arm. But it didn't, because the hand was all wrong. The hand had 5 digits, but the claws would have made a bear run in fear. I slammed the door behind me and ran for the dock doors. The dock doors would not budge, and I could hear the gurneys overturning and the lockers sliding on the floor. It was getting through, and the only thing between me and it now was a single door.
I ran to one of the windows by the dock doors and proceeded to bust it out, which mangled my hand from the glass. Then, as I was pulling myself through the window, I heard the door get slammed into and one of the hinges completely flew off the door and hit the wall. I tumbled out of the window and hit the cold, wet ground. When I stood up, I saw it in the doorway. Now, I'm 6'4", 250, not little by any means, and this thing took up the entire doorway. An 8-foot, 3-foot wide door. It was covered in head to toe, gray and brown fur. It had a very narrow snout, almost like a Doberman Pinscher's, and its ears were just barely visible from the doorway. But I could tell they were pointed up, just like dogs. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I was completely paralyzed. This thing was staring right into my soul, looking at every delicious part it was going to enjoy. I never felt like an item on the menu, but I can tell you it is terrifying. Then it snarled, and that woke me up from disbelief of what I was looking at. I turned and ran. I ran up the hill into the woods to get around the hospital to get back to the street where the car was parked. I hadn't made it 25 feet when I heard the clawing get out of the window. I knew I would never make it to the car this way, so I ran back towards the hospital where the fire escape ladder was. I had used the ladder before to climb to the roof and take pictures of the entire town. I completely skipped the first 3 rungs on the ladder and was now inside the enclosed part of the fire escape. Again, this thing howled and I could feel waves of pure terror fill my body. My hand's killing me at this point, and I'm getting blood on everything, and just as I'm reaching the first floor window I could climb into, this thing slammed into the fire escape ladder, knocking me down a couple rungs. It leapt onto the outside of the fire escape and began clawing at my feet. Just as I reached the window, I felt it. Pain like nothing I had ever felt. It grabbed just above my ankle and yanked, and in doing so shredded my boot, the end of my jeans and my legs. I was able to pull myself into the first floor window, and I heard it push itself off the fire escape and head back the way it had come. Now at this point I'm dragging my left leg, trying to keep my right hand in my hoodie pocket. The entrance we came in from was about 150 feet away down the main hall and around a left turn. As I'm halfway down the hall, I hear the steel doors slam again. I'm dragging myself down this hall, just trying to stay focused on getting out of this place. Then the howling starts again, and I can hear it getting closer. I make the turn and hear the pounding coming up the stairs from the basement. I make it to the entrance and hear the padding of hands and feet on the floor. I made the mistake of looking back just as it rounded the corner. It was running on all fours like a real dog. I bolted down the hill towards the street where the car was parked and realized the car was gone. They had left me. My only way of escape was gone. I just zoned out and kept running down the hill. My leg was throbbing, my hand was in agony, and all I could think was, I'm going to be doggy kibble. Finally, I made it to the first house I could find, and I ran full force into the door and began pounding on it like a crazy person. Thank the Lord this little old woman was home, because she opened the door and I literally fell inside just before I kicked the door closed. Standing on 2 legs at the other end of her driveway was this monster. I broke down in tears. I didn't know what to do. Luckily, the old lady had called the cops because a crazy person who's bleeding everywhere just fell into her home. When the police got there, they asked me what had happened. I told them the same thing I said here, and of course they didn't believe me, thought I was on drugs. EMTs took me to the hospital, and when they did blood work, they found no substances in my system. They then concluded I was attacked by a wild dog. I ended up 36 stitches in my leg, 17 in my hand. I got a rabies shot and told the local wildlife officer my story. He informed me that they had reports of wild dogs running around the outside of town, ransacking garbage cans and killing some local pets. And I informed him that it wasn't a pack of wild dogs. It was a giant Dogman, but they all just thought I was crazy. The only thing I had in my favor was the claw mark on my leg. Even the doctors were confused about how a wild dog could make a mark like that. Now, you know my encounter, and you know why I absolutely know we are not at the top of the food chain. I've never been back to Hazelwood Hospital, and I've detoured anyone from ever going there. That experience has haunted me for the last 11 years of my life. It has made me into the overcautious man I am. I always have to know where every exit is when I walk into a building, and I always know where large clumps of woods are. This experience changed me forever, and it changed the way I look at the world we live in. Just because we all haven't seen something doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It just means some people haven't been hunted for their life. I have no doubt what stalks me that night was the Dogman. I know it in my bones. Thanks for sharing, Jeff. Today's second Ohio subscriber submission. Hey Jeff, hope all is well. Here's my encounter. Please use my name, John Boy. I'm 50 years old from South Central Ohio. My brothers and I have been running around in the woods day and night since we were kids. It was late summer 2013 in Orgenia, Ohio. We were planning a late night catfishing trip on the Little Miami River. It was a pretty good hike to get to where we planned on fishing, about 30 minutes through a set of woods across the field and through more woods. At around 11 p.m., with only the moonlight and a couple of flashlights to guide us, we reached our destination, rigged our lines and baited our hooks and threw out our lines and kicked back and was enjoying the cool night air when our peaceful night was suddenly interrupted. By peaceful, I mean no crickets, no tree frogs, none. The usual sounds you'd expect at a river on a warm summer night. We heard a loud howling roar from across the river. My brothers and I looked at each other, and before any of us could utter a word, there came a crashing from the woods across the river, and a huge silhouette or shadow was standing at the edge of the woods close to the river. All we could make out was a black shape standing at the wood's edge, just out of reach from our flashlights. It looked to be somewhat human-like, but much too big to be a man, and appeared to be somewhat hunched over. If I had to guess its height, I'd say 8 feet or so. We only saw it for a couple of seconds, then another howling roar sounded, and which vibrated through my chest. Without a word, we jumped up and grabbed our poles, and without reeling them, started running back the way we came, hooks and lines getting tangled in the trees until our rods were pulled out of our hands by the trees and brush. We just left the poles and kept running. I think the poles are still in those woods to this day. We exited the woods a lot faster than we entered them, 3 grown men running like scared little kids. We have returned recently during the day and were going fishing there until I felt uneasy and I couldn't. We left. We agreed not to tell anyone about that night and haven't until now. I talked to my brothers and they agreed to me telling the story to you. I believe Ohio to be a hot spot for Dogman, and with the recent upload about the Ross County, Ohio brothers that took down a Dogman, I felt compelled to share my encounter. Thank you, Jeff, for all you do. I appreciate it. God bless. And here is that encounter that he just mentioned. Hey Jeff, please don't use my real name. This encounter happened to my brother and I in the late 80s, early 90s. It was the second day of deer season in southern Ohio. My brother had a .358 Winchester and I had a .308 Ruger, which you are not supposed to be hunting with. The farm we hunted on was rented by my dad's brother. I've hunted on this farm from 1966 when I had turned 13. Now the day had started early like all deer hunts do, on the stand by 5:30. I was sitting on a fallen log with my back to the woods facing a freshly shelled cornfield. My brother was 50 to 60 yards to my right, sitting on a tree stump facing the same field. At about 10 a.m., my brother started shooting, so I stepped out to maybe get a shot at a deer also. Only, when I stepped out, it wasn't a deer my brother was shooting at, but what looked like a giant German shepherd charging at him on its hind legs. So I raised my rifle and shot, hitting it in the right shoulder, and the second shot hit it in the head. It fell down right as it swept at my brother. I ran down to where my brother was there. He had a slash on his left shoulder. I think his coat kept it from being worse. So we got to our Jeep and took him to our uncle's house and called the squad. When it came, so did the sheriff and the ODNR, because my aunt had said a wild animal attack. I have a friend I knew from the ODNR who was hunting on another farm. He arrived also. My brother went in the squad, and I took everyone back to look at what we described, to have a look-see. No one believed us, so seeing is believing, right? This thing we had shot looked like a werewolf, long black hair like a wolf. Its belly fur was white, paws and fingers like a raccoon, only huge, and claws 3 to 4 inches long. Rear feet like a raccoon, only 15 inches long. Teeth just like a giant dog or wolf, very muscular upper body. And the legs very not wolf-like and way more man-like. Long dog-like muzzle, pointed ears on the top of its head. My brother had shot it 4 times in the chest area. I had shot twice, once in the right shoulder area and the head shot. No one from the ODNR or sheriff knew what it was, and they took tons of pictures of it. Now, this was before I had a cell phone and I didn't have a camera, so I asked my friend from the ODNR if he would get me and my brother some pics. He said yeah, and a few weeks later I asked him about the pictures and he said none of them developed. This is what my brother told how this unfolded. He said he saw 3 what he thought were German Shepherd dogs coming across the cornfield, kind of loping along towards him. And he didn't give it much thought because the neighbor farm had some dogs, but as they came closer he noticed they were huge, so he started keeping a closer eye on them. He said when they got to 125 yards away, they stopped. He said the larger one growled and looked at him, almost smiling / grinning. The other 2 started running to my brother's right. And the larger stood on its hind legs and charged at him. That's when he started shooting, and I came into the picture. They decided to wait till the next day to retrieve the body, so they left a new ODNR game warden there to stay overnight, and all through the night he heard howls and shrieks, his words. He had fallen asleep later, and when he woke up sometime after 8 in the morning, the werewolf body was gone. Nothing was ever done or said about it that I know of. Also, on the new ODNR guy's truck was strange handprints on both doors. Also, I've asked my now retired ODNR friend about the pics several times, usually every time I see him. He says he doesn't know what I'm talking about. Also, this thing looked like a werewolf in Van Helsing's movie, exactly like it. Brother's fine, just a giant scratch mark on his shoulder and across his chest. Can't hardly see them today, but gave up hunting after all of that. I still hunt there to this day, but always take plenty of firepower and ammo. Me and him talk about it sometimes, but he won't talk to anyone else about it. And you are the only one I'll ever told this story to other than my family. If you think the story is worth sharing, you may do so, just don't say who wrote it. Thanks for listening. Next email I got from the sub. Also, Jeff, my brother's injury was listed as a dog bite. Next email, an hour later, or 20 minutes later. Also, Jeff, it was the first day of gun season in Ohio. Second, the thing smelled really bad, like wet dog and roadkill that was a few days old. Don't know if I said that before. Thanks again. Third, sorry Jeff, old memory. Creature was around 7.5 foot tall. My brother also said when he first saw them, they were on all 4s but walked very odd, and also said when the big one charged on its hind legs, the other 2 ran off on all 4s. Now, I did interview with him, and it was a great interview, great guy. sometime in the near future, I'd like to get him back on if he's willing. I don't know if his brother ever heard the interview, but I think maybe he should play the interview. If you're listening, maybe try playing the interview that you and I did together for your brother. Maybe that'll help him. And maybe someday he'd like to come on. I think it'd be pretty cool if I had both you guys on, kind of like like an old, what were they called, party lines or whatever, and just talking about Dogman. Anyway, moving on. Today's fourth Ohio subscriber submission. Hey Jeff, my name's Dan, and I'll be the first to tell you my full name because I know damn well what I saw and what truly happened on that day. And if I get crap, I don't care. I'm telling you about this 5 days after it happened, so it's still fresh in my head, because you know how you wake up from a vivid dream with lots of detail, then like an hour later you go and tell the dream to someone and it slowly fades away? Well, anyway, here's my encounter. The day was Wednesday, February 12th, 2020. I was coming home from work that evening, and my drive takes me about an hour to get home. I work near Columbus, Ohio, and live in Evansville, Ohio, so after I leave the big city and travel through the smaller towns, I'm left with about a good 30 to 40 minutes of nothing but back roads and farmlands. They are full of woods and flat farmland, so anyway, right as I was entering the last part of my way home, I turned off the highway and started towards the rural part. I'm listening to some Suicide Boys de-stressing about the day. Then all of a sudden, I had this really bad feeling come over me. I got really nervous and looked in my rearview mirror, thinking that a cop may be nearby or sitting on the road somewhere. I was nervous because I'm currently driving with a suspended license, so I immediately slowed down a little and looked down at my gauges to check if everything's good. All good, I thought. Nothing wrong with the inside of my car, so due to past experiences, I looked for the nearest driveway to stop and check and see if my tires were flat. I pulled into what looked to be a state park entrance with woods on the side I pulled onto, and on another side of the road, it was flat grassy field. Got out and checked the car over, tire by tire, making sure the lights were all working. So far so good, I told myself. I shrugged my shoulders, happy nothing was wrong. I go back around the driver's side to get in. Then, the left side of me, out of the corner of my eye, I caught movement. I turned my head toward the direction and had to squint to make sure I really did see something. I stared at the area for about 30 seconds to make sure I just wasn't seeing things. Then, all of a sudden, I see this huge black mass moving around in the field. From my standpoint, it looked like a big black bull. Dang! That must have been a prize-winning bull, I thought. Maybe it had gotten loose from a nearby farm. It wouldn't be too neighborly if I let it get away. So, me being the careful type, I opened my trunk and got out the aluminum baseball bat just in case it wants to be brave. I know how to herd cattle, for my family in Kentucky raised them, and I've been around them my life. So, I know how bulls can be. They are very unpredictable. As I start walking towards the bull, I'm thinking to myself, do I really need to do this? Why am I doing this? Well, to answer both my questions, I was raised to look out for your fellow neighbor. Besides, that bull was worth a whole heck of a lot of money. So I continue to walk slowly and carefully, not to spook it, because I don't want it to charge me. I relax my breathing and keep a tight grip on the bat and continue to walk towards the bull. So I'm 100 yards away from it, and all of a sudden a putrid, horrid stench hits my nose and I choke. I stopped, stunned by the smell, cough in response of the smell. And at that moment, what I thought was a bull turned around and looked straight at me. At that very moment, my breath left my body and my eyes widened. I felt the strength leave my body. Thing had beady yellow eyes, about 6-inch pointed black ears, and stained yellow teeth. Its gums glistened in the sunlight with saliva. Oh God, oh God, oh God, I said to myself, still not believing what I'm seeing. Our eyes locked and the whole world stood still. Time stopped. All I heard was my heartbeat and the low rumble growl that this wolf-like creature let out. This was a dog, man, I said to myself. It has to be. This thing is as big as a cow. I suddenly remembered my schooling, as in, do not make eye contact with a predator, as it sees it as a challenge. I bowed my head and held out my arm, showing that I'm backing off, and I am in no way a threat, all the while keeping my eyes on it and make sure it stays where it's at. I notice it raise to its hind legs to urinate. Great, I said. I'm in its territory, even more of a reason to get out of here. I must have been walking for what seemed like 5 minutes, thinking I gotta be at my car. I realized I've only taken like 20 steps, making no progress. I'm still looking towards the wolf, its eyes still fixed on me, like it's waiting for me to make a threatening move. My plan was just to ease back to the car and get out of there in one piece. Then, all of a sudden, as if karma decided to show up and give me the biggest FU, without warning, I let out the biggest and deepest sneeze. And as soon as I jerked my head back to see this wolf already charging towards me, my stomach drops, my skin goes clammy. Oh, great, I thought. I'm gonna die here being skinned like a cow. Quick thinking, I knew I'd never make it back to my car, and if I did, what would it do to protect me from this thing? So I decided right there and then, I'm gonna go out fighting. I switched my stance and gripped my bat as hard as I could. I charged, running and screaming at this wolf. It must seem stupid, like a death wish, but I was not about to die like a coward. The wolf was about 50 yards away. This creature's tongue hanging out, drool flying from its mouth, I could feel with each step it took vibrating the earth. I had to think quick. If I try to hit it in the head, I run the risk of it biting me or slashing me with its claws. So I decide I'm going to go with its hind legs. They are the smallest part of it. Then, just as soon as I made my plan, it jumped up and started running on its hind legs. 20 yards in closing. I only have one shot. I know it. Won't kill it, but if I hurt it or stun it enough, it could give me time to get back to my car and leave. I let out one final war cry and the beast roared, shaking my insides. This creature leapt for me. I swung the bat and slid down on my knees and swung as hard as I possibly could, aiming for the beast's left hind leg. Crack! Connected. I knew I had to. I felt it. It felt like I had hit a 50-pound bowling ball. The force of the impact vibrated the bat in my hand so hard I dropped it, letting it fly out of my hands. I heard the beast bellow in pain as I came to a stop. I quickly jumped up and looked back at it. It was on all fours. It just stared at me with those hellish yellow eyes. Right then, I knew I had made a mistake because now the beast is between me and my car. I cursed at myself for being so stupid, but at the moment, I dared not take my eyes off of it, as I knew for sure. One ticked off Dogman, and it's really going to kill me. But to my surprise, it looked at me up and down and just nodded as if saying, "You outsmarted me, you may live another day," or something like that. Then it hobbled off toward the forest, confused and stunned. I picked up my bat and ran to my car so fast I don't think my feet hit the ground. I got in the car, started it, and floored it the rest of the way home, white-knuckling the steering wheel, the motor screaming until I got to my road, threw the bat in a grassy ditch, pulled into my driveway. I took a few minutes to collect myself and calm down before I headed into the house to face my family, trying to think of an excuse as to why I'm in this condition. Taking a long, heavy sigh, I get out and start heading towards my front door when I heard a long, blood-chilling howl. Until next time, I said. Upon opening the door, my wife, holding our 7-month-old son, she took one look at me and sat him down in the playpen and ran over. "Oh my God, what happened to you, honey? Are you okay? Why are you so pale and sweaty? You look like you saw a ghost." "I hit a dog on the way home, honey, and it scared me." "Oh my God," she said, hugging me. "Are you okay, though? Did you kill it with your car?" she asked, looking worried over at me. No, I didn't. I don't even think I left a scratch on it. Thanks for your time, JB. Tonight's final subscriber, Ohio Dogman submission. Hey Jeff, I appreciate what you do. I had a brief encounter of some sort in 1981. I was fishing on a private pond. Yes, I was trespassing at 3 in the morning. Never saw what it was, but I heard it. One thing I do know is that it was bipedal and huge. I could hear it stepping with strides that sounded like 10-foot spans, and all I could see was the top of 30 to 40-foot sapling trees bending out of the way as it left the area. And as I believe most people would have done, I left the area and fast. My first response, besides almost urinating on myself, was to run. But I didn't want to leave my fishing gear and tackle. It was fairly new and expensive. So I grabbed it as fast as I could and unsheathed the cheap fixed blade knife. I ran as fast as I could, going around the opposite direction of the pond to get back to my car. I never went back, and I told my cousin about the incident and to stay away. Moral learned from the story: I will never trespass again. Jeff, no matter what I think or anyone else, continue to do what God has placed in your heart. There is more to this world than what most of us have seen or believe in. Don't let the haters see or hear you sweat. The supernatural is natural. At some point, someone decided to put the prefix super in it because we can't understand all of what God has created, done, and allowed to happen.
All right, guys, like I said in the intro, I had some absolutely terrifying encounters out of Ohio. I hope you enjoyed them. Let's check out some video clips.
Look. Listening that that's not human. It's not a human. Look at the deer at first, but no. Whoa. That is not a human. Oh my god.
right, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's second half as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. Some of you may be like, Jeff, we just heard this encounter right from this guy's lips to our ears today. Why did you narrate it? Well, like I said, I was going through the Ohio folder, and I kind of wanted to share some of the strangest and more horrific encounters out of the state. Other than that, because it's a crazy experience. I really like the guy too. He's super nice. Anyway, some very strange video evidence. Kirk Stokes' video evidence is in that clip as well, or his clip is in there as well. An amazing piece of evidence, if you ask me. But anyway, with that, I hope you all are doing well, enjoying your weekend. It's come to an end, but 4th of July is right around the corner. What is it, a day away? 2 days away? Yeah. Anyway, guys, thank you for all the support, and really all the prayers and well wishes mean everything to me. With that, stay safe, happy, healthy, and vigilant. These creatures are watching our pets, our loved ones, our family, our friends. While we're in the woods, camping, hiking, fishing, whatever, we need to keep an eye on our loved ones, because these things are, and our loved ones may not be interested or aware of the cryptid activity that goes on in the woods. So keep an eye on them. Keep them safe. Keep yourself safe. God bless.